Different story. Okay, so we're going to do case studies, and so case study is again seen as a qualitative method, but in a case study you can also gather quantitative data, all right, which can support your arguments at the end of the day. So a case study is actually a very nice way of combining when you're using a qualitative and a quantitative study together, if you can combine your data, because the case study gives you a framework in which you can combine your information. Right, so at the end of this, you should be able to design a research instrument for a case study, select sources of data for a case study, and conduct a case study. Okay, so this is the high-level case study methodology. This thing is on, yeah. Okay, so you can see that in a case study, the design of the case study is very important, and normally you write a whole protocol on the case study, all right? Because remember that you write a research proposal which says how you are going to do the research. But case studies normally involve interviews. They involve interviews with different people. You can use a questionnaire that's self-administered, plus you can use interviews, plus you can use telephone interviews. So you can combine a whole lot of instruments into the case study. And so that's why a protocol for the case study. So a protocol basically, just when you talk about a research protocol, it's basically a document that says step by step by step exactly what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how you're going to ask the questions, etc., etc. All right. So for a case study, the design is very important, because also you need to understand from the beginning how you are going to bring all this disparate data together into one framework. Right. So you then, this part in dotted lines is basically the conduct case study part of it. So you prepare for data collection over here, and then you collect your case study evidence. And then you analyze the evidence and you report on the case study. Okay, so the definition of a case study is it's an empirical inquiry that investigates a contemporary phenomenon within its real life context. So if you look at research, and you look at the literature on research, just like we have a triangle for project management, there is also a triangle for the different things that you have to balance in research. So the one is generalizability. The one is reliability. And the last one is validity. Okay, so the generalizability is about to what extent can I generalize. So if I do research and I say that people in Russia prefer to play ping pong with pink ping pong balls, to what extent can I say people in South Africa prefer to play ping pong with pink ping pong balls? Okay, so you can see you can't generalize it there. But in other studies, so if I do a study in a specific mining organization in South Africa, I can probably say these results should be generalizable to other mining organizations in South Africa that have the following characteristics. Okay. And of course, if I wanted to come up with a generic set of success factors for community projects in South Africa, if I could count and say there's 100,000 community service projects in South Africa, and I managed to sample 10,000 of them, then I can probably generalize my results. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Okay, then the reliability is, if I do the research again, to what extent will I get the same answer? And then the validity relates to how practically applicable is this answer that I'm getting. So when we talk about a case study, it's in a real life context. So it has high validity because you actually in real life saw that this is the answer to the problem. Okay, I'm not asking this generic panel of experts that are so-called experts. I'm actually investigating in real life what is happening. Okay, and we normally use it when the boundaries between the phenomenon and the context are not clearly evident. So the phenomenon is the thing that you are studying, and the context. So renewable energy technologies in Africa. Okay, but so renewable energy projects or technologies in Africa, you know, is it a phenomenon or is it a context? It's not clear, and so that's why I used a case study to answer that question. And then also, as I've said, multiple sources of evidence is used, and it's especially appropriate to how and why. So do you see that's qualitative? And I hope that by now you know the difference when I say qualitative what I mean and quantitative what I mean. Because if you don't, then I'm worried. Okay, so theories are developed and tested in a sequential step-by-step manner. You start with previously developed theory, and you then compare the results of the case study with that theory. Okay, so say for example, you take a specific framework that somebody has come up with. Let me do it like this. So we are busy with a study where we are looking for the measures of success for community service projects in Soweto, right? So now we do our exploratory phase, okay? And during our exploratory phase, we have a focus group, and we maybe have a Delphi study. So maybe we have a focus group with the managers of the Kliptown project, and we have a Delphi study with the donors, right? And so from that, we come up with the measures. So how should we measure the success? And so we have measure 1, measure 2, measure 3, measure 4. Okay, so let's say 1 is crime reduction, 2 is less teenage pregnancies, more learners enrolled at universities, and what shall we make the last one? Sorry? Okay, higher matric results. Okay, so higher matric results. Okay, so these are all things that we can in some or other way measure. Okay, so now in our, so this we say is the theory, and we say these are the measures that you should use to measure the success of a community project. Okay, so now we go into, and this is then our previously developed theory. Do you see that? Because that comes out of the literature, it comes out of our empirical focus group and Delphi study evidence. Right, and so now we go to the actual case, which is the Kliptown Community Project. And we look at and we ask the people in the community itself, and we say to them, is it or have you experienced a reduction in crime since this project started? Right? Have you are there less teenage pregnancies? So what is your perception of it? We can also observe how many teenagers are there in the community that are pregnant. We can say, are there more learners enrolled at universities, and are there higher matric results? Okay, so this is now in the specific case study. And then we also say, are there any other things that you have seen that have improved since this project has started, which we can use to measure? Okay, so that then we would confirm, and of course we would also ask them, how important is it to you that the crime rate is reduced? Because yes, maybe the project reduced the crime rate, but is it really important to the society? Okay, because it hasn't made an impact on the society if it isn't important. Does that make sense? Is it important to you that there are less teenage pregnancies? Maybe the people don't perceive that as a problem. Okay. Is it important to you that learners go to university? Maybe we find that it's not the fact that the people are enrolled at university, maybe it's rather that they are now gainfully employed. Because not everybody has to go to university to make a success out of life. Because we all have our little place and not everybody is university material. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this was my theory, but by going into the specific case, I might find that my theory isn't supported, and that is how a case study works. Right. And I also might change my theory to a certain extent. Okay, so, for example, changes in theory when for my PhD on the selection of renewable energy technologies in Africa, one of the things that that had come out of the focus group and out of the Delphi study is that project management skills of the performing organization. Because what happens is you get the NGOs who go into Africa and they then say, all right, biogas digesters. We're going to teach the people how to build biogas digesters. And then they stay there normally for about 5 years, and there's lots of funding pouring in and whatever, and they're there all the time to troubleshoot and so on. And after 5 years, whoof, they disappear. Okay, and then the project fails if they haven't done it right. And so one of the factors that we identified with the experts is that the organization that they create in the community that must now build the biogas digesters after they leave must have project management experience or training, or you know, they must have knowledge and skills. And then when I did the case study, I found that the description project management was actually too focused, because it was actually broader than that. It was business management. Okay, because you know, project management, as you know, is focused on doing the specific projects as well as possible. But the problem was that they didn't know how to manage the business, how to get funding, how to manage the HR side, you know, so it was a whole business management. So my theory then changed. Okay, it wasn't disproven, it just changed. Okay, so and it is specifically appropriate if the number of variables that need to be considered is large. And in this study on the community service project, as we've discussed previously already, there are a lot of variables. So we need to, or rather a case study would be an effective way to try and answer the question, because there are so many variables. Okay, so there are different types of case studies. So single is where you only investigate one case, right? Now, obviously, we are specifically looking at Kliptown because they have told us that this is a problem for them. But once we have those measures, we would have to go and do other community projects as well to confirm and to see to what extent it's generalizable, right? And then multiple is where you have several case studies. And the times where a single case study is sufficient, and this is in terms of if you want to do a master's or a PhD, is where it's a closing critical study. So, for example, the PBMR, does everybody know what the PBMR is? The Pebble Bed Modular Reactor Nuclear Program that we had. That was the only project of that kind in the world at the time, all right? So if you wanted to look at the factors of the failure of that project, you can only look at that one project, okay, because that's the critical study. And that also would be an extreme or unique case, all right? So maybe for a critical study, let's rather take something like the Challenger that crashed. So there are other Challengers, but that one crashed. So that's critical to look at why did that one crash. Does everybody know what I'm talking about?
No.
Remember the Challenger spacecraft, maybe you were too young, but there was this big hoo-ha because this Challenger spacecraft was going to take civilians into space. And specifically, there was a school teacher that was going to be part of this program, and she was going to teach the kids from space. And there was a crew of 8, and there were various scientists and so on, but the school teacher was like the thing that the general public sort of latched onto. And then when the spacecraft was launched, it exploded. Am I really that old that you don't know the story? I feel terrible now. It feels to me like yesterday. Okay. And so what happened was when it was launched, the Challenger then exploded. Okay, and then there was a lot of investigation, and they found that the O-rings that were used on that specific spacecraft were substandard, and that was what caused the crash. Now, if it had just been a routine mission, where, I mean, because they send Challengers up at least once a year, or, you know, we actually don't even know how often, it probably wouldn't have been such a big hoo-ha. But because it was this thing where they were sending civilians into space, you know, it was this big story. So that would be a critical closing example. And then the other thing is that it's also for pragmatic reasons. Now, pragmatic just means practical. Right. So, for example, when I did my PhD, there were probably a lot of other renewable energy projects that were going on at the same time that I could have investigated. But I investigated those ones that I had access to. Okay. And so, for the start of this measures of successful community service projects, we're using Kliptown for a practical reason as the single case study, because they are the people that have come to us and said they have the problem. Okay, but obviously if you want to take it further, you need to look at more cases. Okay, so then for a multiple case study, you Okay, so whenever you do a case study, the thing isn't, tell me when it's nicely focused. Fine now. So, for a multiple case, or for any case study, you first have to develop the theory. So you first have to decide what is it that I think is the theory, or that the literature says is the theory. So sometimes in some situations you might take a paper, a seminal paper that was written that says these are the factors for project success in the mining industry. Okay, so this professor that has published this paper in a journal that has a very, very high impact factor, and for my master's I'm going to look at, is this true in the mining industry in South Africa? Okay, because he has said it is true for the mining industry. So I'm going to look, is it true for the mining industry in South Africa? And so I might decide I'm going to focus on coal mines, and I'm going to select 5 coal mines, and I'm going to do it there. All right. So then you select the cases. And so, again, as we spoke about participants for a focus group or participants for a Delphi study, you have to go through the same type of exercise in selecting cases. So why is this case applicable to my study? Why is this case interesting for my study? All right. Because you don't want to go and ask the head of department how many cups are washed in the department every day. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it doesn't make sense to go and investigate an organization that is not going to support or disprove your theory in any way. Okay, so I've got success factors for mining organizations, and now I go to a car automobile production facility. Doesn't make sense. All right. So you have to substantiate why you've selected those specific cases. Then you design your data collection protocol, and you then go and conduct the case studies in the individual, if I can use my PhD as an example again, I had a biogas digester case study in Tanzania, and I had a solar panel project in Tanzania, and I had a tobacco barn also in Tanzania, and then in Rwanda I had a biodigester, and what else was there? I don't know, but okay, there are examples. So, but so you see, there's and so I had to go to each of these separate cases, and I asked the people that were implementing it, and I asked the end users questions around these cases. All right. Then you write an individual report for each case study, where you summarize your findings for each case study, and then you have to draw cross-case conclusions. Okay, so this case study might have not 100% proven the theory, but it could be because of a certain thing in this case study, but the rest of them supported the theory. So we can say that the theory is supported. Okay, and then obviously you modify the theory, because you probably, or very seldom will you find that a case study theory is 100% supported. So then you say, okay, this guy said these are the factors of success for mining projects, but in South Africa, we have a different labor system, and so there are labor issues which are not in his theory, which should be included in theory for South Africa. Okay. Right, and then if it's to drive policy, and normally you do case studies because you want some other policy to change, or you want the way in which people are doing certain things to change. So then you develop the implications, and then you write your cross case study report. Okay, so replication logic in case studies. According to theory, one would expect the same phenomenon to occur under the same or similar circumstances. So if you're doing literal replication, you use similar case studies. Okay, so if you have a community service project in a squatter camp in Soweto, and you have a community service project which is to improve the life of the youth in that squatter camp, and you have a similar community service project in a squatter camp in Khayelitsha, which is there to improve the life of the youth in that community, you would expect similar results. Do you agree with me? Okay. Okay, but then if looking at whether change in circumstances affects the outcome, then you select cases that differ, right? So now I've got a theory that says this is the measures of success for a youth type of program. But what if the purpose of the program is to reduce HIV/AIDS? Okay? Or are there similarities? Right. So then, if that is what I want to, or that's the theory I want to develop, then I will choose a youth program, and I would choose an HIV program. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is my case study. So you can see that I had 3 different countries, and these were my 8 case studies, right? And they were all about renewable energy technologies that were being implemented in the communities, and where the NGOs were trying to transfer the knowledge of how to keep this running into the communities, right? Sorry? Yeah, I battled. I couldn't find any case studies where they would allow me access. Yeah. Yes. I contacted them, and they didn't want me to come. So okay, so that's where we get to the practical. Okay, that it's very, and sometimes, you know, students will write a proposal where they say, no, I want to investigate that specific renewable energy project in the Kalahari. And then if their proposal comes to the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee, we say to them, okay, where's your letter from that project that says you can come and do your case study there? Right, because it's not practical to do research if you're not going to get access. All right. So there are very many very interesting problems that researchers would like to investigate, which they end up not being able to investigate because it's impossible to get access. All right.
But what's the usual reason for not granting access?
Well, sensitivity. There can be various reasons. The one thing is that they're scared that the data is so sensitive. So like, for example, if I say I want to find out from lecturers at TUT why first-year students fail, that could be ethically a problem for TUT if I now go and publish and say the students fail because there is no administrative support and because the lecturers are not properly qualified. And do you understand what I'm saying? TUT will be embarrassed if so. TUT is not going to allow me to do that study. Okay. Then the other thing is that if I'm going to get proprietary information. So if, for example, I want to go and look at project quality processes in various organizations, some organizations might say, no, you can't come here because ours is a proprietary system and we don't want that to be made available to our competition. And by doing your research, you're going to, you understand? So the other thing is research fatigue. So in the ethics policy of the TUT, there is currently a stipulation that says that if you want to do any research using TUT students, it has to go through the Central Ethics Committee. And the reason for that is they don't want people to every week come to our students and say, can we do research, can we do research, and then students don't learn anything because all they do is they sit and fill in questionnaires every class. Do you understand? So there are various, and those are three that I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, those would be reasons. Okay.
Sorry, can you just go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
You said that there's we assume that the theory is that one would expect the same phenomenon to occur under the same or similar circumstances.
Yes.
For instance, taking the very same example, when you're trying to understand why first-year students fail. Let's say in TUT, then you are assuming that it would happen in birds. But can you actually do the study and you find out that?
Yes.
So you can actually go and
yes.
do it. Oh.
Yes. Because that would be your reason for selecting, say I'm going to do it in University of Technology, which are supposed to be different circumstances to academic universities. So that for that reason I'm going to do it at I want to say Kaput, but I'm not allowed to. CPUT and TUT and DUT. All right, so I'm going to select those cases because of the fact that I would expect the same phenomenon to occur. But then in doing my case study, I might find that because of the cultural difference between Gauteng and Cape Town and Durban, there are other variables that are affecting the outcome. All right. So by selecting my cases based on that, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the case. Okay. All right. Okay, so this was then the measures of project success that we found from the study that we did, which I showed you on the Delphi study. Okay, and if you then wanted to do a case study, you would then decide, okay, which industry am I going to focus on? Okay, so if I want to come up with a generic set of measures for project success in South Africa, how would I have to design my cases? Okay, so I want to say that here is a generic way in which we should measure project success for all projects in South Africa. And now I want to do case study research. How would I select my cases?
Talking about let's say the medical industry, the veterinary industry. What I would do is I would focus on different veterinary like production, vaccine production, pharmaceutics production, general research, education. I would do that.
Okay, but so you now have already said I'm going to choose an industry. So if I want to do it generically for the whole of South Africa, I would have to select a case in each industry.
Okay, all right.
Do you agree with me? Plus, I probably would have to say, okay, in terms of the mining industry, I can't just select Anglo. I would also have to select a smaller mine as well, because your circumstances are different. So do you see that to do this case study in South Africa, I probably would have to have at least 50 cases.
Yeah.
All right. And that's why when... Yes. Yeah, but that's why you would have a program, not a project, in a certain university where various students would work in various industries, and then you could put it together as a generic. All right, but also at the end of the day, is it really or how many generic factors are you going to find? Probably very few that are applicable everywhere. Okay, so do you see the types of questions and the types of ideas that have to go through your mind when you design a study?
But then when you find that they are so different, what do you do now with research? Remember now that you've got your own research question that you're trying to answer, then you find that whatever theories that you based your research on, when you link it to the survey, they do not align. Then what do you do?
Well, the thing is, again, you have to be practical. And what I normally say to master students is that everybody would like to save the world with their research. But at the end of the day, you can't. So you have to put boundaries in place and you have to focus. And so instead of coming up with generic factors of measure of success in South Africa, let's say, what are the measures of success for the mining industry? That's more doable. Okay.
And then what if you don't find enough literature to even support whatever it is that you wanted to research on?
Then is it really a problem? Because if other people haven't looked at it from any angle, okay? Because look, there's different angles at like I said in terms of the method. There's also different angles in which you can look at a project at a problem, right? So if somebody hasn't looked at the problem at least from some or other angle, okay, so you might not agree with the theory. So say in motivation, we've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, and then we also have what's that other guy? Okay, I can remember now. McGregor has the XY theory that says that your X managers say that people are motivated or people are not motivated intrinsically to work, so you have to watch them 24 hours a day, otherwise they're not going to work. On the other hand, you have the Y managers that say people can be autonomous, so you can allow them responsibility and you can allow them to work. All right, so there's these two theories. So now, which theory do I pick for my study? And so I have to be practical and I have to pick one. And I have to say, okay, I'm not going to, because there must be about 100 different theories of motivation. So I cannot possibly take all of those theories. I have to either combine some theories or I have to pick one theory.
But do you have to? What if, I get what you're saying. What if there isn't any reference to what you actually found? Then what do you do with it?
That's where you do the exploratory. That's where you start with the exploratory.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, but I mean, even when you went and read about success measures for community service projects, you didn't get much on those specific keywords. But you did get a lot on project success and measures, and so do you understand? So this is a new application, but there is existing theory.
Okay.
So it's about finding the right angle.
Yes. So you would like a new application, but you would like there to be something existing in terms of theory, especially when you're doing a master's. For a PhD, that's sort of a next level, and they, but I mean, like my PhD that I did, nobody had ever studied specifically for renewable energy projects, but there's over 100 project selection methodologies out there, okay? And when I looked at it, and I found that there are all these methodologies, but all of the methodologies are based on the fact that you have to have certain criteria or factors that you have to weight in order to then decide what technology are you going to select. All right? And so people have done research on how do you do the maths, but the important thing is, what do you input into the maths? And for renewable energy in Africa, there was nothing on what do you input in the maths. Okay, so you can always find an angle to the problem. That I answered your question?
Yeah.
Okay, right. We're doing well in terms of time. Okay, so So when we're talking about case study design, we should ask ourselves, should we use a single or multiple case study? And how should the cases be selected for maximum effect? Okay, so if we are looking at community service projects and the measures of success for them, and we are going to select a few projects, maybe we want to select a project that failed, okay? And so we can see why did it fail, and what measures should have been in place, or if those measures had been in place, would it have been a success. Then we can take Kliptown, which is a success, and we can say, okay, what are the measures here? And then we could take something where it's just started off and it's not quite clear, is it a success yet? Do you understand? So you select, or you have to think about how is it for maximum effect? Or I want to find generic success factors for the mining industry. So, I must select small mines, big mines. You understand what I'm saying? It depends on what I'm trying to achieve. Okay. Okay, so the sources of evidence for a case study. So the first thing is documents. So reports that have been written by people about the subject. Archival records. So, for example, if we are looking at project success in the mining industry, for example, we could go into their project management information system, if such a thing exists, and we can go and look at which projects failed and which projects succeeded, and what was the story behind it. So hopefully they've got lessons learned, and you understand what I'm saying. So that those records can help us to answer the question. Then interviews, so that's simple, you just go and ask people questions. Direct observation, so I used observation when I did my case studies, especially when I was interviewing the users, because you can ask them, do you know how to maintain the biogas system? And they'll say yes. And then you ask them, okay, show me how. And that's a different level. Okay, so you're not asking a question, you're actually looking at how are they doing it. All right.
But don't you find that when you observe people, they don't behave as they would if you're not there?
Well, the thing is that I didn't tell them. I sort of naturally asked them, oh, okay, so show me, how do you do this, and how does this work? And you know what I mean? And I didn't tell them, I'm now observing you. You understand what I'm saying? And that's the difference between direct observation and participant observation. Because participant observation is where people know that they're being observed. Okay. And so, that could bias the study. Because people behave differently if the researcher walks into the room. Okay, but I mean, in the case of it depends how you do it. So in my case, I was interested and I showed interest, and they wanted to show off their skills, and so that was quite natural. All right, and then the last thing is physical artifacts. Now that's not very often applicable to management research. But that would be if you do archaeological research, for example. Then you would have you want to investigate how did people cook food in Pompeii, all right? And so you go there and you excavate all the artifacts of the cooking pots, and you put the pots together, and from that you can then tell a story about that specific case. Okay, does this make sense? All right, so this is just an example to show you that this was my study. Now, I had 11 factors on the what's this, the y-axis over here, right? And these were the two technology factors. And then you can see that for each of the study or each of the cases, all right. So this was Rwanda, this was Tanzania, and this was Malawi. Right. So for each of the cases, so for the domestic biogas in Rwanda, I did interviews, I had documentation that they gave me, that they'd written about the results, and I did observation, okay? And in terms of my two technology factors, you can see that I could find in the institutional biogas, I could find evidence that this factor was important. Whereas I couldn't in the interviews, whereas for the second factor, I couldn't find evidence that it was important. Okay, but at the end of the day, you can see that there was enough support, and basically I had to say how much was enough support. Okay, and so at the end of the day, I could say this is an important factor. Okay, because you sometimes will not necessarily unearth everything in every observation, or sorry, in every source of data, because you might be after, say, I know the one factor there was transfer of maintenance skills. Okay, and so when I did the interview with the institutional biogas people, they didn't see that as important, and they actually didn't do it. But then this project actually failed. All right. Whereas with all the others, you can see that in the interviews, I found evidence that it was done. Okay. And that it was important. Okay, does that make sense? But so you see, you have to have your theory, and you have to then set up a questionnaire that interrogates the theory, and you then have to, at the end of the day, somehow bring it all together into a framework. Okay. Okay, so this is one of the things. So you can see one of the factors was quality installations, and each one of these, the I, J, A, D, J, A, K, was either a document or an interview or an observation. Okay, so you can see that there was quite a lot of support for the fact that quality installations was important. And because it's qualitative research, there's a story behind it, right? And there's different aspects of quality. Okay, so when we look at our community service project, what sources do you think that we can use to determine the measures of success? Okay, so interviews would be one, yes.
Participant observation.
So we could actually go and look at how do the kids respond and how do they interact and so on and so forth. Right? Documents. So KYP brings out an annual report where they say what has happened this year. They also post on Facebook significant events that happen. So you could analyze the posts on Facebook to see, what are the significant events and how does that relate to my theory. Okay. Archival records, they have since the start, they've had an official audit of their books every year by an auditing firm. So there is archival records that you can use, because that will give you an indication on where the money was spent and, Okay.
What would be the major difference between those documents and archival records? Because I think they have more or less the same.
Yeah, archival archival records is more stuff which is generated on a regular basis and forms the intelligence of the organization. Okay, whereas documents would be things like Facebook postings or we went overseas and here's the report of going overseas, right? Whereas every year we have a financial audit and this is the info, so it's more audited stuff, if I can put it like that. Okay. So in my study, there was no archival records because nobody had. So say for example, one of the NGOs had left a checklist with each of the users and had said to them, okay, every month you must indicate your satisfaction on the following things of the project. So are you happy with the quality? Were you able to maintain it? Was it usable? Did your health improve? And so they tick that off and they then put that into a database. That would be more archival records. Whereas what I found was documents where they had written up on the different experiences and what had happened. And does that make sense? Okay. Right. Okay, and then in the book, there is a chapter in the book on case studies. And remember that when, at the beginning of the year, the very first thing you did was you critiqued an article using the criteria of good research. Right? And this is a nice table when you do a case study to make sure that you are following the criteria for good research, and this is specifically applicable to a case study. All right. So the purpose, because with qualitative methods, the quantitative people always bash us and say, but you know, it's not valid, it's not generalizable, it's not reliable because there isn't statistics and there aren't 20 million questionnaires and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, as long as you follow these different criteria for good research in whichever approach you follow, it means that what you have found has some standing. All right. So, I was very brave actually, because I did my PhD in an engineering faculty. Now, engineering faculties are very quantitative, all right? And I was actually very fortunate that I learned a lot about qualitative research while I was doing it, because I had to learn so much, because I had to substantiate and justify why I was following a qualitative approach, and I had to prove that I was following all the criteria for good research. So that meant that I was very, very rigorous in following all the steps. And one of my external examiners actually wrote, you get the report back from the external examiner, all right? And now you've spent like 4 years of your life in this baby, in producing this baby. And according to you, this baby is now just perfect. Then you get the results back from the external examiners, and then it's like page after page after page of corrections and comments and whatever. And then right at the end, the one external examiner wrote, this is one of the best qualitative studies that I have seen in the field of engineering. And and then you say, why didn't you say it at the top? Why did you have to say it at the bottom? Because when you open that document, your heart just goes into your shoes. Okay, but that was because I was working in an engineering environment, and I had to make sure that I convinced, because my supervisors were also not qualitative experts. They were quantitative people. So every single little step that I took, I had to justify to them, why am I doing this, and is it rigorous, and is it reliable and is it valid, and do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So this is just there for you to go and look at, and you need to be able to I don't remember.
256. Well, it's from there then it goes on.
Yeah, so part of what chapter is it?
It's chapter 9.
Chapter 9.
Assuming, yeah.
Yeah.
Case studies. Then exhibit is 9. Exhibit 9.1 is on page 261.
Yeah. So that's a very nice summary of how to do a good case study. And that